Since we started 2 years ago, we have now 3.5 million beneficiaries, which is nothing if we compare with the needs, but at least it's something. So the idea is to have in this panel like a different representation from different actors working with us. I don't know, I'm going to start maybe by Maria Noel. Maria Noel is the Director of Program in UN Women. As you know, probably the SDG Fund has gender as one of the cross-cutting issues with specific indicators in all of our programs. And at the same time, with UN Women, we designed 2 years ago when we started with the fund, the so-called dual strategy, meaning that we are trying just to work with specific target groups of women where they need really a specific support, but at the same time trying to integrate gender as a cross-cutting issues in all the work that we are doing. So Vinicius is the director of the office of ILO here in New York. ILO is one of the agencies working with the SDG Fund through matching funds and also working in the implementation of different programs. One with ILO is in Peru, where we are working with local producers of quinoa, trying to ensure that we reduce the value chain and the local farmers are beneficiaries in a better way. Also we have the ambassador of Tanzania that really I also appreciate that he is here. Tanzania is one of the countries where we have very good results from the program that we are implementing there, supporting the local government in the development of the social security system in the country. So we would like also to have the voice of the beneficiary country, if I may say so. We have also Tony Cole, who is the CEO and founder or co-founder of Sahara Group. Sahara Group is a Nigerian company working mainly in oil and gas. And Tony, the company, is a member of the private sector advisory group that we have in the SDG Fund, trying to engage the private sector, not only in talking to the private sector as donor, is a donor, but also talking to the private sector as an actor and co-designing with them the program and co-implementing the program now in Nigeria called Food Africa. And finally, we have also Antonio Parenti, who is the responsible for the Economic and Development Department in the Office of the European Commission here in New York. And the European Union is one of the partners that we have as contributing with matching funds, in this case in 2 countries, in 2 areas or in 2 places, in Cuba and also in OPT. So the idea is also to have the view from one of the institutions that are contributing through matching funds in the implementation of our programs. So I'm not going to spend more time, just the only thing that I would like also to mention is that we are going now to launch the second round of proposals with the specific programs that we design with the private sector in another 8 countries. And also we are now in the process to launch the online library for SDGs. So if you would like to have some materials or products related to the SDGs, you can find all of them in our website, in the SDGF website, where you have all the best practices and experiences that we have from our programs. So which is really like to have the information about the implementation of the SDGs very easily. So as I mentioned, and this is the last question that I would like to raise here, is that as you know, the fund was created with an initial contribution from the government of Spain that was very generous really, and also now we have another 22 countries contributing to the fund through matching funds. So, and also we received some contributions from the private sector. So we are trying also in the design of the fund to have all the stakeholders with us. So I think that maybe I'm going to give the floor to Maria Noel, and thanking again all the people here present and also all the panelists that find the time to come in this busy week. So thank you, Maria Noel.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure for young women to be here today and to talk about the role of women in economic empowerment and how the role of women can really generate this and push this gender equality that we all need. That is a precondition of the SDGs implementation, because if 50% of the planet is not included in development, it will be very difficult to have a just and fair development. So for us, it's essential to mention that it's not just also a precondition. Very strongly is that vehicles like the Trust Fund shows that we can work differently, not only because of the matching funds, but also because of the mainstream policies that the fund decided, and of course gender is one of it, but also to ensure the sustainability of any action that we take. Because as the SDG fund requires matching fund, it requires also the engagement with local opportunities, I would say, whether it is a commercial bank, whether it is a foundation, etc. And this, per se, will ensure the sustainability of the project. And this is the way we should work. We should work in the UN thinking that our initiatives are going to continue and are going to be recognized by different parts of the society to really do the transformation that we need to do according to what the world decided with the SDGs. So forgive me if I stop 1 second and say what we believe gender equality and women's empowerment will be for the SDG implementation. And of course, as I said, we have the SDG number 5 with several indicators and targets, but we also have around the 17 goals a very particular focus of how that particular goal will be implemented if it has a gender lens. Women are left behind in many aspects, and if you start with the SDG number 1, for poverty eradication or for hunger eradication, women are the ones that are bearing most of the responsibility and accountability to feed their own family. So we started realizing that in every goal there are opportunities to underline the role of women to implement any of the goals. In infrastructure, in biodiversity, in partnership, in peace and security, in every one of the goals. But what we believe very strongly as well is that by empowering women, providing them the same qualities that a man receives, whether it is information, whether it is land tenure, whether it is access to finance, women can be more productive. The problem is that they never have access to all the inputs that are required for women to really excel. And I'm talking directly in the joint program of Rural Women Economic Empowerment that is being financed by the SDG joint program. Together with IFAD, which is the bank of the UN, the Rural Bank for the UN, WFP and FAO, we are seeking to accelerate progress in providing economic empowerment for rural women. We are talking about more than 2,000 rural women farmers and pastoralists with 2 pilot programs. And what we want to do is to demonstrate how investing differently, this can accelerate a much more productive way of working for women farmers and having an enormous impact in the family and their community. So we believe very strongly that this project at the end will yield those results and will enable us to think differently when we organize a program of rural development. We also believe that there are some enablers, but there are also some barriers. And the barriers are policy barriers, legal barriers, and of course, if we don't engage with parliaments, with civil society to demand the rights that women don't have, there are more than 70 countries in the world that does not allow women to inherit land. So therefore, you have the most important input for women farmers to develop, which is the land that they don't have access. Of course, there are other issues that relate to finance, that relate to agriculture extension service that is very man-oriented, or that relate as well to technology. So in Young Women, we believe that climate-smart agriculture enabled with the innovative technologies such as blockchain, technological platforms where women farmers can really eliminate certain aspects of the agriculture business and go directly to the buyers. Women have access to information, women can be better prepared, and at the end of the day be more productive. So rural women is a focus of Young Women. And next year, we have the Commission of the Status of Women, which is the moment where all the member states get together to understand the evolution or the trends in women's empowerment and gender equality and women's empowerment. So next year, in March next year, the Commission for the Status of Women will focus on rural women to try to bring all the solutions, all the creative solutions that can accelerate that development in the rural women. But still, we have difficulties of the rural women to access to finance. Therefore, we are going to other platforms of partners in order to accelerate this using the most, the most recent technology. And we will like not only to work on the legal aspect and really remove those barriers that I was mentioning, particularly in land tenure, but also in the way the ministries of agriculture are gearing their investments. Because if you think about it, the most important development instrument is the national budget. And sometimes we don't focus in the national budget how it's being spent. So for us in Young Women, it's extremely important to see how the ministries of agriculture are really, living as a target of their services, women. Unfortunately, this is not the case, so we are pushing more and more. And the last thing I would like to bring to you is that by working together with a platform of UN agency, and of course with civil society and the private sector, we can all work together towards one goal, which is this transformation of rural women that can increase productivity, decrease completely the food insecurity, and can enable to take on board climate changes adaptations and climate changes mitigation, and at the end of the day can allow women to feed their children properly and at the same time to have their own business and become empowered. Thank you very much, and I will be happy to answer questions if it's the case.
Okay, thank you, Marina. Because this panel is a little bit gender unbalanced, I thought that maybe women have to speak before, and then now we're going to move to the other side. So first of all, I'm going to give the floor to His Excellency Modest Mero, Ambassador, Permanent Representative of the Republic of Tanzania to the UN. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you very much. I've been a policymaker for 35 years in the government of Tanzania. So let me say this before I start giving what you were supposed to be getting. We in government, when we plan, we think of each and everything. And we do think of a number of issues that all governments have to do. For example, when we're implementing the MDGs, we're working in the context of our policy focusing on MDGs and putting policies and plans that can make us implement and achieve the MDGs. We managed to succeed in MDG 2 of education. We were one of the countries who succeeded now because all children are enrolled in school. And in health, we're able to ensure that every 5 kilometers circumference of Tanzania, there's a dispensary. If you walk anyhow, a 5 kilometer, you find a dispensary. Before, a dispensary will be 40 kilometers away or 60 kilometers away. So we had to invest in dispensaries. And then the whole country, you go everywhere, you have 5 kilometers circumference, there's somewhere there's a hospital. So you don't go more than 5 kilometers. And this was important for maternal child and mothers, particularly when they're delivering babies. And this we had a lot of support from many countries, and I remember different such and many other philanthropies. Even Michael Bloomberg and so many other people. Bill Clinton played a lot of role in that. So we have been an example in that area. We also went as far as looking at the sanitation of water and so on, and having borehole water sanitation to be close to the people. And we have been really trying to focus to outreach the people in the rural area. But the economy of the country is too small to support the population of the country, and because the country is not a developed country, we have a lot of challenges to make. Currently, what we're doing, we're trying now to work on the infrastructure of the country. For the past 5 years, we've got roads crisscrossing the whole country. When we built this road, 7,500 kilometers of tarmac in the country, across the country, you can go anywhere by tarmac. We found that many people who are facing poverty, their poverty have been reduced because they were able to go to the marketplace. If you're farming maize, corn or whatever, you are able to take that product to the market, and these roads opened up the market very well. Right now, we are building serious infrastructure on standard gauge railway system. That will ensure that we crisscross the country by railway system and then putting economic zones everywhere. So much that when the market develops, then certainly the poverty will be addressed. It's also true that we went to the point of saying that education in Tanzania must be free now to the secondary school in the SDG. We have achieved 100% primary school, and we are going to achieve also 100% in secondary school in the coming 5 years, because we think that education up to secondary school is necessary to help people to address the poverty around their vicinity. I mean, people are poor because they can't turn around the things which surround them to make them, help them to live better life. I mean, when you talk about poverty in a country with the desert is different from talking poverty in a country like Tanzania. Because in a country with the desert, you cannot plant anything and harvest. But in a country like Tanzania, where the land is arable, if you help people to develop, they can help around themselves. So give them a secondary school, they'll be able to turn around their own life. We believe that by 2020, our people will never be earning $1 a day. We believe they'll be earning up $10. And we believe even when we talk about $1 a day, not all of them earn $1. Very few of them they do, because our land is not a desert. And my president told people, don't come to us for food from the government. You have to till the land. What have been saying. Anyway, so that was just a brief to say that while we are getting support from everybody else, we are also trying to do our homework to ensure that we address those things which you can see by our vivid eyes. These are the things we can do ourselves, and we can approach them. This will need support. We do not preempt all support we need, but also we have a responsibility to do things which we can, and the rest we're going to get support is supplement what we are doing. That's the belief we have. So let me say that the Green Colleague, the Sustainable Development Goal Fund was established in 2013 to support countries in addressing poverty. In Tanzania, we have resolved to achieve the SDG by taking action in a number of areas to eradicate poverty, and in this case, all sorts of funding is welcome. That's why the Sustainable Development Goal Fund is very important to us, because we can't outreach everyone. That's why we need different sources of support from different non-state entities, from different financing, for whatever, as long as we're trying to address poverty which is pressing our people. Give you an example of what government is doing now to the sector. I can say that we have ensured that all children go to primary to secondary school for free. The government budget put forward that we have to take them to school for free. And last year and this year, we have been contributing money to make sure that every child sits on a desk, chair, and has a desk. And we've ensured that in primary secondary school, they must have a laboratory, all of them. We have a lot of us, they must have a laboratory. But right now we are concentrating on putting laboratory in primary school because you need to inculcate science and technology in those schools. So we're doing that and we are contributing money from our pocket, ourselves. We do contribute because government cannot have enough money. So we also do it. While there's support from outside, also ourselves, we are contributing the money and people are very forthcoming to contribute to the children. Because the argument is that you can't let your child sit down on the floor. It's unacceptable. So we have reached a point where we know that we have a responsibility to make sure that they don't sit on the floor. Of course, the social sector, all of them are trying to address a number of issues as I said earlier. And in terms of infrastructure, we are investing soft and hard infrastructure. A number of infrastructure, for those who live in Tanzania have seen how much we are investing in infrastructure. We want to be really a middle country by 2025, and even before that. We are investing in energy, in different capacity of energies, and we are going to have at least 5,000 megawatt power in the coming 3 years, which is enough to run our industries now. We're putting a number of industries. Right now, in the past 12 months, we've invested 81 middle industries in Tanzania. We've built new industries, completely new, to address the supply chain that is now at top of the world. And then, however, we have realized that we have been unable to reach the people below the food poverty line. There are people who are really poor, dehumanizing poverty. And for this reason, the government of Tanzania is overhauling the current national program. The National Social Safety Net program, in implementing the program, it was found that many people do not attend to school because of poverty and hunger. You take a child to school, but when he goes to school, they have no food at home. They're hungry. This is where the fund from SDG is helping them. So they're having food stamp and Medicare that help them, the children who go to school. We've not been able to cover all of them as we should. Of course, it's a process, but then the funding from SDG fund has been very, very helpful to us to help these children. And this fund is a joint program of UNDP, ILO, UNICEF, and UFPA. And so far, they have at least 5 million people, 5 million people, of which 54% is female, and the other 139 are the young kids who are in school, and at least the rest are from the different ages group in the young category. We can say that the fund has helped them to reduce shock of poverty. Sometimes a child refuses to go to school because they know that when they go to school, there will be no food and nothing can do. So when this contribution from SDG fund has been given to those few families, at least 9.7% of the families are facing that kind of poverty. Has been very helpful to them. What we're saying that you were saying that this funding should be scaled up in order to support many of these in many other countries, particularly the disease. The situation in Tanzania is not different from other countries. It is the same in many countries because I've been around many countries. Some countries have seen more poverty than I've seen in my country, and I think that the idea should be that to make this fund sustainable, so that it's collect this funding so that many children can be supported, so that they can go to school, so that they can have food in school, and it's the idea which have been working very well in Tanzania. It's very much respected, and the government have been also playing part to support the promoter of the fund themselves and work with them, supporting all what they think that they need to support the government. And they think that this discussion should see the fund as an important element to address poverty eradication. Maybe I stop there. I want some questions.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ambassador. Now I'm going to give the floor to Antonio Valenti, who is a Minister Counselor, head of Section of Economics, Trade, Development in the delegation of the European Union to the UN. Thank you.
Thank you, Paloma. Thanks for the invitation to be here tonight. It's a pleasure for me. It's a pleasure, especially if you want to bring the witnesses of very positive work that we are doing with the SDG Fund. We have, since the beginning of your endeavors, been co-financed a couple of projects in Palestine, occupied territory, and in Cuba, which are very much in line, if you want, with our ideas and policies on development. What the EU does, well, in this case, specific case, what the fund has been granted by EU are direct EU funds. The European Union is, as an institution, so not with the member states, the fourth largest donor in the world, which is something that very often we forgot. If we put the European Union itself plus its member states, clearly we are by far the first donor of direct assistance in the world. We do not necessarily spend the money or invest the money directly. Very often we do so via an external agency, being it the World Bank, being it the agencies of the UN, and in particular we're doing it also with the fund, where we co-finance. What are the important points for us in doing so? Well, first, I think the very concrete approach that the fund has taken in their project. I mean, there is a very easy and trackable results by the operation of the SDG fund, which is highly appreciated on our side. There is the gender dimension, which was a point that was underlined a moment ago. But there's also other very specific points, one of which is the very heavy accent on having the private sector involved. Even, especially when it comes to the SDGs, even all the money that the donors which are providing are or will remain, I wouldn't say a drop, but it's certainly only a part of the ocean of money that we need, the famous trillion of money that we need. We need the private sector. And to have the private sector, we need to have projects which are related and reliable, if you want, to the private sector. In this sense, I think that the work which the SDG has done, the SDGF has done, for example, in Palestine, is particularly relevant, both because of the focus on women, but also because of the focus on entrepreneurship and sustainable entrepreneurship. So these for us are the type of elements that we're looking for when we take certain financing decisions, and which we have found at last particularly concrete and matching in the case of the SDG fund. Of course, this is not the only way, this is not the only fund in which we're working. We're working with a number of other institutions and organizations. But I think that indeed these specificity, if you want to use a trade language, your comparative advantage as compared to many other situations, indeed this capacity to bring together to the fore the receiving government, but also the private sector in the receiving countries, so which would allow not only to, if you want, to foster the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goal, but also to have a sustainable result for the future. So let me stop at this thing. We have still 20 minutes to go, and I guess 2 speakers. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And now I'm going to give the floor to another agency of the UN, ILO. As I mentioned, they are working with us in many countries. That probably is Peru is the most successful, where we have already evidence of the results and the impact of the programs.
because I work for the ILO, the National Labour Organization. Our objective is to promote a decent work for all, and we have a very heavy, let's say, standard setting goal. We produce a lot of conventions and recommendations. And in the past, I mean, our main interlocutor at the country level are the Ministers of Labour. We also talk to employers and to trade unions, but our main, let's say, interface are the Ministers of Labour. And for some time, we thought that Ministers of Labour are not really those ones who create jobs. So I actually have a limited impact on job creation. If you really want to create jobs and to promote decent work for all, we need to work in a cross-cutting manner. We have to talk to the Minister of Finance, we have to talk to the Minister of Planning, we need to work with the SMEs, we need to look at infrastructure, we need to talk about the agencies, and that's pretty much the nature of the work of the SDGs now, right? And if you look at the SDGs, in particular SDG 8, the moment that member states decided to put together decent work for inclusive growth, I think that was a perfect match, because on one hand, you don't have growth to be inclusive, it has to create jobs. And without growth, there will be no jobs. So it's clearly a perfect match, decent work and inclusive growth found maybe together in the SDGs. So getting out of the box, out of our traditional, let's say, developers, and going beyond the use of labor, going beyond our traditional, let's say, stakeholders, it's key for our ultimate objective, which is create decent jobs for all. And in the SDG fund, actually we're working now in 4 countries. That's Peru, as mentioned, there's Mozambique, Bangladesh, and Tanzania. We're very privileged to be as part of the Tanzania's project to improve the street protection system. And we're looking forward to the new project in Nigeria, in food security. And if there is one thing that these projects have in common, because they're totally different, is that we are working together. So for example, this particular project that you alluded to in Peru, so basically it's a project on economic inclusion, sustainable development for grain producers in 2 particular localities of the Andes region, Ayacucho and Puno. We are working with FAO and UNESCO and with the Minister of Agriculture, Minister of Development and Social Inclusivity, with local governments and the National Association of Export Producers. And for us, this is quite new, because generally we have been working with Minister of Labour, and probably our impact will be quite reduced. We just go through the labor channel. By connecting with the others, both agencies in the system, but also with the other institutions, we are enhancing the impact. And that's exactly, I think, the building of this type of project. Basically, we're looking at producers, those who are part of the program ND and Greens, and we are looking, we are integrating. You have a focus on generating new opportunities for income and employment with new models of inclusive business and articulation of best practices in the rural value chain. And there is a target of increasing by 5 to 10% the income of these grain producers. And we have also set to ourselves a target in terms of productivity increase. So that's 10% productivity increase for the group of people that are part of the project. It's cross-cutting. It looks at skills development. It looks at promotion of public-private partnership. There is a gender dimension as well. So it looks at both production but also commercialization of the products. So this integrated approach is fundamental. So without that, without linking to the other UN agencies and without linking to the other, let's say, partners, we wouldn't be able to really achieve this. And that's the beauty of the SDGs agenda, of the 2030 agenda, and also about projects like this. So I don't think there's space anymore to be inside our little boxes and try to do things business as usual. We really need to connect. We really need to, especially by creating jobs, if our objective is create jobs, we're not going to create jobs if you don't have like a good infrastructure, business infrastructure, if you don't have a good education system, if you don't have a good health system, if there are no enabling conditions in terms of promoting business, you know, and I know a lot about that. So that's why I think this type of model, it's very interesting, comprehensive package.
Thank you, Vinicius. So now we have already the perspective of member states and also UN agencies. And now, last but not least, is the representative of the private sector, Tony Cole, as I mentioned, is the co-founder of Sahara Group. Is the headquarters located in Nigeria.
Thank you, Paloma, Your Excellencies, and everyone in the room. So I have the lone voice here and a very big responsibility of representing an entire private sector that cuts across I don't know how many continents. Thank you for all the pressure. But having said that, the one thing that we always take out of the room first starts with an fast go alone, but if you wonder what this means to us. When we were invited to sit on the private sector advisory group, essentially it was a cross-section of private sector companies from all continents to sit down and work on what type of language commonality can we find between multilateral agencies and the private sector, knowing that we speak very different languages, we move in very different ways, and for many years there was a lot of mutual mistrust between multilateral agencies and the private sector. And so it was a huge task to close the trust gap, to ensure that we could work together, and knowing that the essential truth is that we cannot do this on our own. The multilateral agencies can't do it on their own, the governments cannot do it on their own, the private sector cannot do it on their own. And so there was a need to come together to figure out how we could work the SDGs together. The quick thing that was learned once I came into the room and started taking a look at the SDGs and what had been agreed was that this was exactly what the private sector had been doing for years, and we could understand it very easily. We've been doing it without having a name for it. So some call it CSR, some call it whatever you want to call it. But the issue was that every single 17 goals of the SDGs, you can find a private sector player in there that's very committed to it and has been doing it for years. And so the task for us was that how could we bring all of this together, figure out what kind of language we could put around it, and get multilateral agencies, governments, policymakers, and all to work around the same goal to achieve it within a set period of time. And so we were able to come up with a framework working with the SDGF and the private sector advisory group, and came up with a framework that works. Now, once we got that, the next thing as private sector individuals was that it's one thing to have a document that you can look at, nicely done document, but it's another thing to put it in implementation. And so you had to put a project that you could work around to test the paperwork, to test the framework. And so working with the multilateral agencies, ILO, UNDP, FAO, we began a very, it's almost like getting into a marriage, a courtship, and discovering for the first time how private sector and multilateral agencies must work together, whether you're working around the bureaucracies that you come across, or whether you're going to work within the speed and the due diligence that goes around it and all of that. And we had to put all that together. We came up with a project in Nigeria called the Food Africa Project, and that has been, it's been an eye-opener as to how we work together and work closely to achieve the same goals that we all wanted to achieve. But something that came almost out of that immediately was another project in Nigeria whereby working with the government and taking a look at the government on one end that had already adopted and signed up to the SDGs, and the private sector that was already playing in that role, was that could we adopt what we had seen with the SDGF and the joint programs that we had, and can we adopt that to bring in private sector players that are already playing in that field together, such that we could begin to report what was already being done and capture it in a framework that could then be reported onto the government platforms of the SDGs that were being implemented, and taking that up onto the United Nations at the global level. So that way, we're not finding private sector companies that are doing exactly the same thing in silos, but now you can bring them together, in areas that they already are working on and capture what they're doing in line with what the government is doing as well, and put it on a platform that works. And so, working with the presidency, we got the presidency to agree and adopt and inaugurate a private sector group in Nigeria with most of the major players that you would find who are already very active in any of the 17 goals. And this was adopted, this was inaugurated this year, and PwC, being one of them, is working on the reporting tool that every single private sector organization already playing in their area can then report, collate all of that, and push that up to the SDG-F, and they then have a reporting tool to show what Nigeria is doing. And now we're working with the Office of the Special Advisor to the President on the SDGs to do that. And we have leading companies from Google to Unilever, BAT, Coca-Cola, Dangote Group, the Sahara Group, PwC. Then we also have academia with the Lagos Business School coming in to capture the reporting and the monitoring and evaluation, which is something that as private sector we're very used to, because we set targets, we set KPIs, we must measure it, and we must see that we're succeeding. And so we have the LBS working on that. Then we have the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, which goes exactly to the point that you are making about the budgets, to ensure that the SDGs are captured in the budget completely. And so we're working with the government to ensure that every single budget organization captures the SDGs as a tool and as a point. And then also working with the government to see what do they prioritize in their own SDGs, because every government will prioritize something in the SDGs. And what they're prioritizing, can we then capture from the private sector those things and ensure that that is captured, but not leaving what they don't prioritize out. Because you will find in every country that you will see private sector organizations that are working in what they already enjoy doing, which the government might not prioritize, but they're already there. And if no one is capturing that, that just falls into the cracks. So our responsibility is to capture what is prioritized by the government and what the private sector prioritizes themselves, which may not be prioritized by the government, but ensure that the nation captures it as an SDG goal or an SDG tool that is being carried out within that nation. And those are some of the things that we're working on. So there's the measuring, there's the scaling, there's an ensuring that nobody is left behind, and everybody that we can bring and what they're enjoying to do, we bring all of that together. And so we're seeing a very, very tight-knit collaboration between the private sector and the government, and what it's doing. And one thing, and I'll close with this, one of the things that we've seen since we started working on the private sector and private sector advisory group is that the trust deficit between governments and private sector, and the trust deficit between multilateral agencies and the private sector, is closing, because we're all working on goals that everybody believes in. And as a result of that, you're having conversation and discussions like this in the room. And once people begin to converse and discuss around common things, then you find that they begin to know each other more, they begin to trust each other more, and they begin to work together. And so it goes back to the proverb that I started off with, which I want us to remember, that it's very easy for us to work very fast if we're working alone. But if we're going to go very far, which is what the SDG goals intends, then we must continue to work together. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Tony only mentioned the reference or the name of the project that we are now, we just had the kickoff like a month ago, which is Food Africa, where we are trying to create a facility in Kaduna, which is in the border almost with the territory of Boko Haram, trying to create a facility where the local farmers are going to receive, in the first place, the training in order to see how to preserve mainly the tomato in the area. As you know, Nigeria is one of the first producers in the world of tomato, and they usually buy 60% of the consumption of tomato from outside of the country. So the idea is, in the first place, to train the farmers in order to preserve the tomato, and also to train the farmers in order to use the cooperatives that they already have in the best way. And then also they're going to have like a second part of the facility where the idea is to help them and to support them, trying to commercialize the tomato in the best way. So we are, with a very clear picture about the distribution of the roles. For the training, we're going to have ILO for the cooperative sites and also FAO for the food side. And also we are going to have the support of the goodwill ambassadors of the SDG Fund, the Roca brothers, that are one of the best chefs in the world. And they are in fact preparing the so-called Kaduna bonbon using a recipe putting together chocolate from the factory that they have in Girona in the north of Spain, and the tomato from Nigeria. So it's a very nice project, and the idea is to improve the life of more than 5,000 families, at least as the first step. Of course, we're trying also to keep in mind the women that we have there. It's not an easy area to work with them, but we are also trying to integrate this gender approach as a cross-cutting issue in the whole project. So I think that now we have the whole picture about the work that we are doing from the private sector, from the UN agencies, from the international organizations, and also from the member states perspective. And I don't know if maybe I can give the floor to if there is any question or anything that anybody would like to raise up, or any comment, or anybody very happy. Go ahead. If you don't mind to introduce yourself.
My name is Franco. I'm an Italian representative from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the invitation and for the presentation. Very interesting from different perspectives, and allowed us to know a bit more about the SDG Fund and what you have been doing. And I think that this is an excellent example of what we need in order to actually achieve the agenda. Coordination is crucial for this. I was wondering if you, from your experience, have you managed to catalyze cooperation between the different actors that goes beyond projects that have been implemented in the framework of the SDG Fund? And if so, what would be the key elements in order to ensure that that cooperation goes beyond the funding that has been received for that specific project?
Okay, we have experience in some countries where we started with SDG Fund project, and then the national government. Of course, one of the main goals that we have is the sustainability of the projects. We would like really, as I mentioned before, to ensure the national ownership and the sustainability of everything that we are doing so. And this is the main reason, because we establish as a requirement the creation of the national committee with all the stakeholders that in some countries probably they never discussed before together. So we are trying to push, if I can use this word, for the creation of a network at the local level. But in some cases, at least in two of the projects, because not all of them are already finished from the first round, but in some of the projects we are receiving now requests to continue with the project beyond the work that we already did and the work that we already started. So I think that for the SDG Fund, the important thing is really to build up and to promote this kind of alliance really to achieve the goal, which is the eradication of poverty. And if in this way there are some local countries or donor countries or private sector companies ready to continue with the work that we already started, is fine. For us, the main thing is also that even the coordination with the agencies, that is a real challenge really in the field. We try to ensure that through the authority of the resident coordinator. So everything that we receive related to the distribution of resources or decisions related to the program or the implementation, the relationship with the national government, everything is through the resident coordinator, which is really also the way to ensure that we are promoting the sustainability of the program beyond the fund. So I don't know if I already answered to you. Okay. You first and then you? Okay.
My question is to you.
all protocol observed. Thank you. Everyone's clear. I would just like to know if, well, one of the things you said that caught my attention was the fact that it was possible to actually simulate the SDGs, gender equality reform into each of the goals. That kind of really resonated. I was wondering, particularly the applicability of this kind of initiative at different layers in a country, for instance. So at the government level, what is being taken to them to begin to articulate this goal in that direction? I'm not saying that. Is there a model that we can adopt? Are there things that we can talk to begin to have that kind of conversation? Because I think that's easily, so it's outside there, the necessity for it, the thoughts behind it, but integrating it and taking it out there to make it work is not clear.
Well, first of all, we have a convention, that is the Convention for the Elimination of All Discrimination forms, CEDAW, that is being ratified by more than 170 countries. And by starting by this convention, I am underlining that this convention talks about gender equality. So this is a legal document that has been internalized in every country. 170 countries have. Some countries have ratified CEDAW with observations, but the principle of gender equality has been accepted. So that is the legal basis, if you want. Now let me put 3 examples of how to make sure that gender equality is considered. For example, access to justice. The executive power, the legislative power, and the judiciary, the 3 of them has to take into consideration the equal access to justice for men and women. So what are the measures put in place to ensure that women can have access to justice and can have a due process in a divorce settlement, in a pension settlement for kids, etc. So in every aspect, there is a gender equality element of the justice sector. Well, that's not a good example, if you want, because it's obvious that we have to have equal access. But let's go to the disaster risk preparedness and the gender inequality of risk. I mean, what is happening when there is a hazard, when there is earthquake or whatever natural disaster a government happens? It affects disproportionately women, but women don't have access. So how is it that the national disaster preparedness is going to consider the attention of women? So for me, that's the mainstreaming of gender, but with a focus on how this is affected. Poverty eradication, hunger eradication, access to health, access to education. So in every one of the goals, or in every one of the consequences of the goal, like climate changes, there you have a vision of how there is a disproportional affection of women. So that's why we need to bring this into the equation. And in job opportunity is clear, you know. Very recently there was a report of McKinsey stating what happened in the world if women are given the same opportunity to work and to be productive. And of course to consider the care economy, because if women don't have access for children, for childcare or elderly care, they cannot go to work. So they were saying that the growth of the world could be even up to 3% of the GDP. Because we are saying that there is a workforce that is unequally willing to, you know, allowed to access to production. So this is an economic factor, but it starts with the human rights. It starts with the discrimination, but it's also an economic factor.
Okay, so I think that I have 2, so if you can start and then you go.
Thank you very much, Madam. I'm coming from Belgium, and I think I have a tough question for the SDG Fund. Thanks a lot for all the presentation. my tough question is, how does the SDG fund vet its private partners? And I'm asking that because, as we all know, one of the weakest targets in the SDG, in the Agenda 2030, is the one on fossil fuels subsidies phasing out. It's a further weakening of an already weak G20 commitment from 2009 in Pittsburgh. Why is it further weakened? For no better reasons, of course, than lobbying from the fossil fuels sector, industry. So you hear me coming. So taking that together with the fact that, as I understand, the gentleman who eloquently spoke about the action in Nigeria is a representative of oil and gas industry, as I understand, works in food-related projects in Nigeria. But isn't that the interpretation of corporate social responsibility as we know it in the last century, mainly based on an approach of philanthropy? Doesn't corporate social responsibility in terms of sustainable business practice for the fossil fuels industry mean that with a horizon of 2050 or even 2030, I mean, to be compatible with Agenda 2030, that they should actually close business wholesale or transform into something completely different, and not just with some tokenistic investments in alternative energy, but truly transforming their business practice into other energy sources, or making sure that their practices cannot allow for repeating the horrific environmental contamination of the Niger Delta or the terrible disownment of the Ogoniland people. So my question is there any vetting going on, and how can we make sure that contamination of countries and governments and multilateral commitments to bring about the Agenda 20 by some industries that are incompatible with it does not happen through the back door?
You know, maybe we need to talk to the private sector and to ask the private sector, and I will pass also the floor to the representative of the private sector. But one of the things that I would like to mention is that, I mean, from our point of view, when we talk in the Agenda 2030 about the private sector, is probably the most inaccurate way to call the private sector, because the private sector doesn't exist. When you go to the private sector, you realize that I mean, the companies have completely different challenges depending on the size, on the territorial place where they have the headquarters, on the area where they are working, or the sector where they are working. So the challenges are completely different. So last year, in order to prepare our report, we had 5 workshops in 5 regions with more than 100 companies participating in that. And every single company has completely different challenge. So, I mean, what I'm trying to say is that the private sector is not only one thing, it's not a monolithic approach. Then the second point is that when we talk about the social responsibility, I think that there are 3 different ways that we are trying to use in order to work with the private sector. One, of course, is the traditional philanthropy, as you mentioned. Another one is the social responsibility departments, which is a completely different thing than philanthropy. And then the third one, which is from our point of view and the work of the SDG Fund, the priority is to integrate the SDGs in the core business of the company, in the ADN of the company. So, which is probably a challenge also, but is the most efficient way to change many of the habits and ways to work in the private sector. So I think that it's important to have these 2 things in mind, and then we can go to the private sector and maybe ask the private sector about it.
Okay, so you touched on many things which I'm sure you are not even aware of, and you're touching very close to home. So first of all, I am from the Niger Delta. Secondly, I've seen a lot of the abuse in the Niger Delta. And third, I know that you cannot make changes from the outside. You have to be deep in the inside if you really make any changes. So So yes, I'm in the oil and gas sector, but I'm also in the power sector, I'm also in the infrastructure sector, I'm also in a lot of sectors which you may not be aware of. But one of the things that we do is that we advocate from the inside. I learned a long time ago that the only way you can make changes is sit down in the room so that you can hear this kind of questions and you can engage people first on. If we stay on the outside, you will never make the changes. Never. So one of the things that we've done as a group, is to ensure that we stay in these rooms and we answer the hard questions and we work on them and we make the changes. I've lost many people, a lot. A lot of people have died in the Niger Delta, people I know, people who don't have role models anymore because they've taken the wrong people as role models. And so one of the things that we do is that we stay in there and we continue to make sure that they have the right role models. And we speak on behalf of a lot of people. Now you talk about changing the entire fossil field, it's beyond us. I cannot do that on my own. Now that requires the same kind of global collaboration that you see with the SDGs, where every country comes up and signs it, including yours. So it's not one company and it's not the private sector alone that can do that. So I've sat down at the Global Forum, at the World Economic Forum, sitting down as part of those who have been looking at what the future of oil will be and whether oil as a fuel or as a source of energy will continue. We've sat down, we've looked at that, we've talked about that, we've seen whether there are alternatives that can be done, and we've tried to make a lot of collaborations. So we work on that. But also there's another thing that you talk about due diligence, and when we talk about the private sector, we talk about Nigeria, something always comes up. And so I also sit on a group called the Pact Against Corruption Initiative. And we sat down very, very clearly to sit down to work on how we deal with issues like this, because these are issues that nobody can deal with if we don't deal with it ourselves. And so we know what needs to be done, and we will continue staying there irrespective of what people think, so that we can make those changes. So the point is that if we do not collaborate, if we don't stick together, if we don't learn from each other, and if you don't have people who are in the room so that you can hear their perspective, then you're going to make mistakes, because you would make laws and policies that cannot be implemented. And so you need to hear both sides of the story, and that's why we're here. We're here to tell our part of the story, so that when we then come out with things that are implementable, then all sides can work together to make it implementable. Because if it's just one-sided, we'll spend another 100 years and we'll not get there. Our task is the same as yours. You want a cleaner environment, so do I. I want my children to survive as you want yours to survive. I want a more transparent and accountable government, so do you. It's beneficial to me. And I said something at the beginning, the private sector saw that the SDGs work for them. It's good business. It works. And so that's why we're here. And we will make it work. And so we'll continue to close the trust gap, because that's what it's about. We must close that trust gap. You must be able to sit in the room with me and trust me that my intentions are good. And I must be able to sit in the room and trust you that your intentions are good. And together we'll work together. But if we don't trust each other, we'll never get there. And that's what the world is about now. The SDGs is about building trust. Private sector, multilateral agencies must sit down, and we must let go of the past mistrust and begin to work together. It's a good goal, trust me. We're here to stay. Private sector is here to stay. You need us, we need you. So let's work together.
Thank you, Tony. I think that the ambassador wanted to say something, and I pass you the floor.
Thank you very much. I just want to be to contribute to the question and the issue of the social corporate responsibility. The companies will not care whether they promote the environment or not, because for them they look at dollars and cents. So what the country has to do is to enforce the regulation laws and to deal with governance issues and to deal with corruption issues and to deal with transparency issues. We are doing it in Tanzania. We have seen a lot of changes. We've seen everybody paying tax now. We are getting our money back from those who stole our money. and we can do it.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador. I think that I have the floor here in the first one. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I am a brother from the permanent mission of Ethiopia. Just wanted to say two things. One is, of course, I completely agree with my colleagues from Nigeria who talked about SDGs as good business. I think that's absolutely true. I'm happy you mentioned the McKinsey report, which I was able to attend in one of their presentations. It makes a very strong case that women empowerment is not only the right thing to do, but it's the right economic policy. So I think the bottom line is, in order to implement SDGs, we need renewed global partnership, solidarity with, as it was mentioned, in order to bring everybody on board. We just cannot do it under government, civil society, private sector. We all need to come together. I think that's the spirit of solidarity that we need. Having said that, let me also say a few words on the SDG fund program in Ethiopia. As you have seen in the concept note, Ethiopia is one of the beneficiary countries. We are very grateful for that because, as I already said, we cannot implement SDGs without the full empowerment of women. But if we want to achieve SDGs, we need to empower women. How do we do that? Among others, how you are helping us in Ethiopia. One is, we need to ensure that women are fully involved in the agricultural sector. For that, we need to really address their constraints. Access to that, as you mentioned, I think that's key. Most women, particularly in rural areas, they are poor and they are engaged in agriculture. So we have to ensure that they have equal access in terms of land. And not only land, but also in terms of agricultural input. That's really key. If we want to change the way women live, I think these are two things in rural Ethiopia, not only rural Ethiopia, but in most developing countries. The second issue, we need to promote and advance women entrepreneurship. That's it. Because without that, you cannot really empower women. And I know I'm not going to give you a lot of examples. Women are frankly speaking much better entrepreneurs compared to women. So, but they need two things happening. One is access to finance, both in rural areas as well as in urban centers. I think here comes the importance of financial inclusion. I think this is key, without which we cannot really realize the full potential of women for job creation. The other is they need also training. This is also key as long as we want them to be fully in charge of their economic destiny. So what I have said are already being done in Ethiopia, thanks to, of course, the SDG fund program, and this is in line with all what we are doing in Ethiopia. The funds program are fully in line with the national priorities because for us, 50% of our people are women. We just can't think of sustainable, inclusive development without women empowerment. I think the vision of leaving one behind cannot be realized without the full involvement of women. Just want to say this obviously we need solidarity and not really some sort of going back, but looking forward. This is what we need. I think this is the spirit of SDGs. And thank you very much for this opportunity.
Okay. So thank you so much. Well, we have 1 minute. If you are able to talk in 1 minute.
I will be short. Where can we find guidelines of the donors or what kind of projects you invest in or help? Can we find that upon request or is it on website?
No, it's in the website.
It's very good, the website.
In the website you have, thank you, Mariana. But in the website you have the whole information about the countries where we are working, even the project documents of every program that we have now, the activities that we are doing also for advocacy, the partnerships with the private sector. Everything is in the website, but in any case, if you are thinking in a specific request, more than happy to give you the information.
I think that's really what everyone just wanted to know.
Okay, so you have the whole information there. So thank you so much to everyone. I think that the most important conclusion, or at least from the point of view of the fund, is that really eradication of poverty is a responsibility of all the actors in the society. meaning that we need, as Tony mentioned, really to talk together and to discuss together about the role of each one, because the idea is not that the governments will be replaced by the private sector, or the private sector by civil society, or civil society by the governments. I think that the idea is to reinforce the role of each actor, but of course trying to achieve the goal, which is really eradicate poverty all over the world. So thank you so much to all of you, and thank you also to my team that I didn't mention, but thanks to them we are here. So thank you so much.